Brian Kelly and LSU lose the top recruit in the country in Bryce Underwood. What does it mean for the SEC? Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. A reminder, you can check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And we're reacting to the news that LSU loses the top recruit. Bryce Underwood flips his commitment from LSU to Michigan. Bryce Underwood had been committed to LSU for about a year, and to flip his commitment just 2 weeks before signing day. Look, we had heard writing on the wall here, right? LSU had the money. They were giving him a pretty good NIL deal, but we had heard rumblings that Michigan was coming for him. And this was all in part to really the aftermath of Michigan's national championship game. They win the national championship last year, and, they go into this offseason and they lose J.J. McCarthy, goes pro, goes to the NFL draft, and they really didn't have a quarterback, set up. They thought Orgy, they thought this guy, that guy, and we've seen Michigan's offense has been dreadful this year, and they need a quarterback of the future. So big Michigan alums, particularly Dave Portnoy from Michigan, Michigan alum, stepped in and decided, hey, we need to step up and put our money where our mouth is. And Portnoy threw some money in. I'm sure some other big-time Michigan donors did the same. And now we see, Michigan is getting it. There was a report 2 weeks ago that they had offered him $10.5 million over 4 years, and that was reportedly turned down. So, you got to think LSU was giving something close to that, probably a little bit less. But Michigan came back and countered, and they ended up getting him. And now the report's out there that it's somewhere in the $12 million a year territory. It's $3 million a year for a college football player. Granted, most of look, if he pans out and he lives up to the hype, he's not going to be at Michigan for 4 years. So really you're talking about, a 3-year deal. And how much money did Michigan offer up front? That's another question. We'll find out a lot of these details over time, but just kind of reacting to it, it's a big loss for LSU, a big loss for Brian Kelly, particularly on the heels of their 4th loss of the season, losing at Florida to Billy Napier. Then after that game, you lose your, one of your top offensive line recruits, flips to Ole Miss, and now you lose the number 1 recruit in the country in Bryce Underwood. It's a big loss for LSU, and look, we want to let you guys hear a little bit of what some of our fellow Locked On hosts had to say. So let's see what our buddy Matt Moscona from Locked On LSU had to say.
The easiest way I can say this is the way that I've said it here for weeks and weeks and weeks and months for as long as we've talked about this. The best analogy is the baseball draft. Every year, there are prospects that tell their college baseball coach they're coming to campus. But you sweat out the draft. They're committed, they sign their paperwork, whatever it may be. But the draft still comes, and you're going to have Major League Baseball teams that make a financial offer. And guys can say, I'm not going into the draft, not going to take the offer, or they have a number that they're solid to. And the question is, do they remain solid to it? And every year you sweat out the draft because you never know how motivated a Major League Baseball team might be coming to the table, pot committed to getting that player and willing to pay what it takes to get there. And that was always the concern with Bryce Underwood. It would be very, very easy to sit here today and say, oh, I knew this was going to happen all along. That is fundamentally absurd if anyone tries to argue that they knew this was going to happen all along. And I'm not telling you from something I think or just from an LSU fan perspective. I have never had a conversation with Bryce Underwood. Me personally, I've never had a conversation with Bryce Underwood or his family. I have, however, had plenty of conversations with LSU coaches, with LSU recruiting staff members, with support staff members, with LSU boosters, with high-level people within LSU's collective that have been very forthcoming with me about where LSU stood with Bryce Underwood, finances and all. And everyone, even up until this moment, as I record at 6:15 p.m. Central Time on Thursday, November the 21st, just 45 minutes after Bryce Underwood flipped his commitment, today, members of the LSU collective We're having dot the I's, cross the T's conversations with Bryce Underwood's attorney this afternoon. So much to so that they thought this was done, wrapped up, done. But there's always the fear, the concern, the what if of the Godfather offer, the offer you just don't refuse. So, how does that come to pass? Look at how this is played out now. Bryce Underwood has been committed to LSU for almost a year. He picked LSU a year ago in January. Almost a year. Bryce Underwood has not visited Michigan since July of 2023. That means Bryce Underwood has not stepped foot on Michigan's campus 30 minutes from his home since Sharon Moore's been the head coach. Bryce Underwood, his family, on their dime, have taken no fewer than 8 visits to LSU. They were in Baton Rouge for the Alabama game. Bryce Underwood was here with his girlfriend. Bryce Underwood and Joe Sloan, LSU offensive coordinator, text, talk every day. Great relationship. Bryce Underwood told Crane and Company in Nashville in July at the On3 event that he wanted to go play in the SEC. He wanted to go where he was going to be developed for the NFL, and that Michigan hadn't developed quarterbacks, which they haven't. So all of these things, not things that I'm saying or that recruiting analysts are saying, these are things Bryce Underwood and his family not only said, but also did over the last year. This is an instance where Bryce Underwood's dad gave an interview to On3 where he said point blank, we are looking at a NFL decision, not an NIL decision. Where are you going to go to be developed as a quarterback so that you'll go into the first round of the draft, make $40 million, and then in your second contract, $400 million? That's the decision. That was the mindset that they spoke about on the record. And I'm telling you, everything and every conversation I've heard and had with everyone around LSU, the football program, and the collective, mapped to the fact that they were convinced while LSU's NIL offer was not as big as Michigan's, the gap wasn't so big that it was going to change Bryce Underwood's mind. I will tell you this, and I have not said this yet, but I did have an opportunity. Hang on. I'm literally getting a text. Wow. Okay. The number that I was just texted from someone associated with LSU who would know is that Michigan got to $12 million. There's your answer. The way I've said it here forever is, what if someone comes and dumps the Godfather offer? You hold your breath waiting for the Godfather offer. What if the Godfather offer comes? The offer you don't refuse. $12 million apparently is that number for Bryce Underwood. Sometimes there was a kid, y'all. You might remember this guy, Zach Lee. Zach Lee signed with LSU as a quarterback, was a talented baseball prospect as well. And Zach Lee said he was not going to play pro baseball. He was going to play football for LSU, football and baseball. And he showed up on campus. He was going through fall drills, fall camp at LSU with football. The draft came. The Dodgers took him. He was at practice going to LSU. And that number, Frank McCourt and the Dodgers kept getting higher and higher. And ultimately, they got to $6 million and got to the point where he said, I have to take it, and he left. Eventually, you get to that point. $12 million is the number I was just told that Bryce Underwood got from Michigan. So $12 million is $12 million. How do you turn away from it?
That again, Matt Moscona, Locked On LSU. More to come here on Locked On SEC. But first, I want to remind you guys today's episode presented to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Look, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more than or less than on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long over at Prize Picks. And now you can win up to 100 times your money over at Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks, the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half, doesn't come back, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Download the app today. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It is Prize Picks. Go run your game. Rolling along here, Locked On SEC. Want to let you guys hear what our host of Locked On Michigan had to say about the flip of Bryce Underwood.
This is a giant move for Michigan. This is something that Michigan has been working on for a very long time, right? This didn't just start as the season started to go downhill. This was something that they have worked on since I was told somewhere back in the spring. And the Wolverines ended up prevailing. But it, like I said before, it was very much like a Jim Harbaugh style thing where every kind of little thing had to go right for this to work. Okay. And now suddenly, not only does Michigan for the second time in the last 8 years get the number 1 player in the country, but it's almost consensus. Rivals, come on, get your stuff together. He's number 2 overall on Rivals, but he's number 1 on every other recruiting service. Obviously, the second 5-star in the class. And this is a shot across the bow, this is a paradigm shift in college football. Because this is going, and I understand he's a guy in the backyard. He's 15 minutes away from Ann Arbor, all of those things. But considering he has been committed to LSU since January 6th, I believe. And I went to their boards last night. They had some nice stuff to say about me. But there was zero doubt that he was going to be signing in the class, right? Because the SEC has long had a stranglehold on elite talent, whether they were from the South or the North. This is a shot across the bow. This is a game changer. This is essentially, and no, I'm not going to be superstitious about it, but it's kind of like a knock on wood thing, a can't miss prospect. He is the next Trevor Lawrence. I've got Connor Stallions calling me right now to talk about it. This is something that is just unprecedented for Michigan. This is a different era than the Rashawn Gary of it all. When it was basically trying to explain like what the school can do for you, and Michigan got itself into the NIL game. It got itself into a pole position over the last couple weeks with Bryce Underwood, and it's suddenly going to pay off. Now, here's the thing about it. It's going to also have a ripple effect in that it's going to lure other top talent to Ann Arbor, right? This was... we've talked a little bit about like Derek Meadows, and I know that Ty Haywood's name has come out a little bit here since. These are names that I'd been hearing since Sunday that Michigan is wooing and getting having a pretty good chance of flipping from. That's not a guarantee. Meadows is not necessarily tied at the hip with Bryce in the same way, but I think it certainly improves Michigan's chances. I think you'll see some offensive changes. I think you're going to see a lot of people in the transfer portal that you maybe wouldn't have seen before. And I think when you look at 2026, what you're going to start seeing is a bunch of different players suddenly looking at Michigan. And some of it will be NIL plays and such, but there will also be just guys that otherwise weren't going to be looking at Michigan that now will, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. This is going to become a little bit more of a coalition of people who really wanted to do this. So Connor Stallions again, we will get to him momentarily, but not on the show. Speaking of, huge to have him involved. That was part of the turning point, was being able to have Connor Stallions a part of this recruitment.
That, again, our hosts from Locked On Michigan. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC, a special Friday edition. We got some more videos coming later in the day. Make sure you keep it locked right here to Locked On SEC, wherever you get your podcasts, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. First, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is presented to you by our friends over at Z-Biotics. We told you guys about Z-Biotics. If you're a tailgater, if you like to party a little bit harder, Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. It's that byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next day. Marlo's had a lot of those. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this product down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best the next day. Again, best results. Make the pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep, and then enjoy the next day. Wake up feeling refreshed and get ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more. Get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. Z-Biotics, it's backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 15% off. Today's episode also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the action happening this weekend in college and the NFL with America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers, you bet $5, you get 150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app, they're going to give you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and college all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, go check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. And that's at FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com today to join and sign up. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Well, thanks for checking us out here on Locked On Big Ten, a breaking news edition here. Michigan just landed five-star quarterback Bryce Underwood. He was the #1 quarterback and the #1 overall recruit for the class of 2025. He is a Bellevue, Michigan native, and he stunned the college football world when he announced late Thursday that he is flipping his commitment from Brian Kelly and LSU to go to Michigan. There are a lot of things at play here. Some of them we've discussed in advance here on Locked On Big Ten. Some we'll get into right here. You everyday listeners and viewers to Locked On Big Ten are very familiar with this story. We dedicated a podcast to him last Friday, and he's the one that Michigan reportedly offered $10.5 million of nil money to in order to come to Ann Arbor, which is about 18 miles from his home in Michigan. Now, it was reported shortly thereafter all this story was floating around last week. His camp, the people in his camp, they reiterated the fact that Underwood, $10.5 million or not, was going to remain committed to LSU. He liked where his career would go there, and he thought it could be developed there. And who knows how much nil money he was getting at LSU. I wasn't under the impression it was as much as Michigan was offering. But he gave his verbal commitment to LSU back in January. And Brian Kelly built his entire recruiting class of 2025 around landing him. In fact, the January commitment, now the verbal commitment announcement came just weeks after LSU's Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. So there was a whole lot of hype about being a quarterback at LSU and all that stuff. Now it's surprisingly time for Plan B in Baton Rouge, days from National Signing Day, December 4th. So something changed and money talks. It's a good thing, too, for Michigan, because Michigan's recent interest stepping up a little bit, if you will, in Underwood, it cost them another recruit. There was a four-star recruit, Carter Smith, out of Bishop Verot in Fort Myers. He caught wind of this. He committed to Jim Harbaugh and Michigan last fall and was very excited about going to Michigan. And he caught wind of this recent recruiting of Underwood, this last-minute push. And he said, I'm out of here. You guys don't want me? You want him? Good. I'm out of here. Then the report came that Underwood was going to stay at LSU, and Michigan had lost this four-star quarterback. Now they had nothing. They were floating around with everybody, and they ended up with nothing, it looked like, until Thursday. So pretty interesting situation here. Things saved by the bell at the last second here for Sharon Moore. As far as Underwood goes, he's got great size, great athleticism. He can run. He's got great arm talent. And so his passing game is fairly developed as well. Through 48 high school games as a starter, he has 165 touchdowns. That's a lot. He really is an offensive threat, and he's young as a senior. In fact, he won't be 20 until his third year of college. And just to make this story more insane and crazy, in case you didn't know this, I know my regular listeners know this, but one of Underwood's high school coaches is Connor Stallions. Connor Stallions. Yes, that Connor Stallions from the Michigan Spygate story. I guess he's influential, huh? Apparently so. Looking in from the outside, Underwood, he may have a shot at starting pretty early when he arrives at Michigan as a pretty young true freshman, because there's not a lot in the pipeline at Michigan at quarterback right now. In fact, this year has been an unmitigated disaster for Michigan at the quarterback position after operating under the luxury of J.J. McCarthy in 2022 and 2023. Sherrone Moore, he shuttled back and forth between Davis Warren and Alex Orji and the recently retired Jack Tuttle. Moore made a fatal mistake here. He relied on the Michigan man culture and next man up, and they thought they had their next quarterback after J.J. McCarthy already in the building. That was the mistake. They should have gone out. I've said this repeatedly, not just now. Should have gone out to the transfer portal and got themselves a Will Howard type like Ohio State did. Didn't do it. And now Michigan's season has come crashing down to mediocrity. And, without a top-notch recruit in the works, had they not landed Underwood here, all they really have in the pipeline is Jaden Davis, who so far has redshirted. I mean, he's there right now, and people speak highly of him. And they were tempted to use him when they were going through their three quarterbacks earlier, but they didn't want to burn the red shirt. Although, at this point, he could still play in Michigan's remaining games and not burn his redshirt year. He might be worth a look right now. I mean, who knows? Could be the next Tom Brady. Might as well find out. But once Underwood arrives on campus, there's going to be a lot of pressure to play him sooner than later. And you don't want to start Jaden Davis next week against Ohio State. Maybe this week against Northwestern would be a better time to do so and take a look at the kid. And again, the awkward spot for Michigan here this week too. If you start him or not, or play him or not, give him some snaps, whatever the case may be. This Northwestern game is a must-win game for Michigan this weekend because they're stuck at 5 wins. They want that 6th win to become bowl eligible so they can practice these guys some more. And unless they pull up a huge upset in Columbus, Ohio next weekend, they got to get this win this weekend. So very interesting scenario this weekend.